The 7C Principle from Horváth Partners. This is Mr. Miller. He works at an international corporation where he's in charge of strategy. There's a huge amount for him to do because the customers are switching to the competition in large numbers, which is making Mr. Miller seriously worried. Does his company still have the right business model? On his quest for a solution, he finds the 7C Principle from Horváth Partners very helpful. This approach shows him which fields of action to analyze in order to understand his current business model properly and to figure out how it can successfully evolve. The 7C Principle is centered on the strategic core of any company: customers, products, and markets. So Mr. Miller starts by identifying which customers he'd like to offer which products in which regions. Then, Mr. Miller takes a closer look at the customer's perception of the company, asking what selling propositions his company should be highlighting to position itself in the market. For example, it could represent speed and high quality. Next, he evaluates the customer interface. Mr. Miller has to decide how he wants to reach the customers with his products. In this area, he might expand his sales team or collaborate more closely with retailers. And he considers what customers should be primarily paying for example, the product, its usage, or replacement parts. After that, Mr. Miller takes a look at the value chain. He determines which services his company will provide at which locations in which form, and also what he'd like to hire partner companies to do. Now he needs to find appropriate cooperation partners. Mr. Miller decides which companies he can successfully collaborate with in the long term. Choosing the right suppliers and R&D partners is highly important. But just as important for his business model is developing concepts for the future today. So, Mr. Miller thinks about what new products or innovative technologies he'd like to invest in. But all of this can only be implemented with the right employees. So now it's time to look at human capital. Mr. Miller identifies what knowledge his team should bring to the table and what HR structure and corporate culture he is aiming for. Thanks to the 7C Principle, Mr. Miller conducts a thorough company-wide analysis and develops new ideas. He evaluates the options he's come up with so he knows which model would bring in the most money. And finally, he puts his knowledge into practice. It's a great success. Before he knows it, the customers are lining up at his door. Tip of the hat. The 7C Principle from Horváth Partners. More information at horváth-partners.com.